Hello everybody, I am Gears of Planet and welcome back to another Deadlock presentation. This one is going to be talking about the hero Venator, and a lot of issues he runs into based on the way he's designed and how he operates, and what makes him like fundamentally weaker than a lot of the other carries in the game. And so yeah, that's kind of today's presentation. I hope you guys enjoy. So, to give you a little bit of context, I watched this YouTuber named FT Fades. Excellent guy. He plays Venator in Eternus lobbies, and he's one of the only one who does. Um, so yeah, I like watching him. He's a funny guy. Crashes out occasionally, especially because Venator is fairly weak in Eternus. But yeah, overall it's been pretty fun. Problem is he loses a lot. Like it's like on a good day he'll usually get like a 50% win rate with a Venator, which is not great, but that's like on a good day. And realistically, it's more like a 65% chance of losing, which is yeah, that's really bad. That's a 35% win rate on a character that's more or less designed to be a carry. Which, for those of you who don't know, carries are characters that are usually the like main damage dealers of a team. They need a lot of souls to get power and to get stronger and everything, but once they have those, then they're able to pretty much wipe out an entire enemy team. This would be characters like Wraith, like Seven, debatably Infernus, characters like this. Um, but in Venator, even though he is technically a carry, according to the game and according to his overall kit, he can't really do that. So the question is, why? And what is it that makes Venator so much weaker than all the other carries? Well, from what I can tell, notably that I can tell, because realistically, I don't know everything. It could be I get a good chunk of this wrong. So it could also be that I don't fully understand it. But this is just the way I see it. There are four problems that run into him. Number one is issues with his uh, design, as in the way that his abilities operate, and some of the mobility problems he has. Number two, power scaling. Number three, which is a big one, item restrictions. And number four is secondhand nerfs due to the current state of the meta. And this is mostly affecting the pure and blessed effects on his grenade and on his crossbow and his heavy melee after Gutshot. So, and a very important distinction before I start talking about this. I'm not saying that Venator is weak. That is not at all the point of the slideshow. He is pretty average, and realistically, in like lower lobbies, he does extremely well. He can completely wipe the floor. The point of the slideshow, however, is to show how limiting his design is and how much he's locked out of interacting with various systems in the game, such as certain items, certain scaling, just overall just there are some items he literally just can't build, um, obviously. But then there are also items that he could build, but they don't benefit him at all compared to other carries. And then additionally, how much the general meta affects his power and how viable his grenade and his crossbow are. So please, like, I'm not talking about his power or general balancing. That's not the point of this. This is a just a breakdown of some of the issues with his design and current state of being. So the first issue comes in with his design and the way that his abilities function. Now, normally for a carry, you have four abilities. Your first ability is a damage ability. It's usually some kind of a skill shot, or yeah, it's mostly a skill shot, an AoE, or some other thing that deals damage to the enemy. This is Wraith Card, Seven Ball, Infernus, Napalm, not really. Technically, yes. And in this case, Venator Grenade. Usually, this is where a lot of carries get their power. Wraith is the most notable example of this. Most of the time, when you're building a Spirit on Wraith, it's going to be her card that carries almost all of her damage. After that, your second ability for a carry is usually a movement or denial option. This would be something uh, movement and or denial. Denial in this case means it's usually a crowd control effect of some kind. Um, so, for example, for movement, we have Wraith Teleport, which is literally you click it, you go to your destination. And in terms of a denial ability, you have something like a 7 stun, which charges up and then stuns the target. Then the third ability you have is either a passive or an imbue ability. So a passive would be something like Infernus Afterburn, and then an imbue would be something like Wraith's Full Auto or Seven's static lightning thing and stuff like that, where you basically enhance yourself for a short duration of time and you gain additional effects. And then the ultimate, usually for a carry, it's two things. It's either it's a very big damage, so what you call it, Wraith, not Wraith, Seven Thundercloud, or it's crowd control, Wraith Telekinesis. Um, and that's how most of the time a carries is designed. It's a pretty versatile kit. It's kind of a jack of all trades. They can do a lot, and they can notably do a lot of damage. But they're kind of limited. They only really have one movement option, and aside from stamina aside from stamina or items, they don't really have that many great escape options if they decide to commit with their movement option. Venator, however, is slightly different. His first ability is his damage ability, much like the other carries. Okay, so good so far. His second ability is the denial ability, which is immediately where we start to see a little bit of a problem. Now, I am aware, and I do know that you can use Gut Shot for movement. It has a knockback effect similar to Shiv Alternate Fire, and you can use it for like a little bit of a boost, but it's not intentional. The point of gut shot is not to be a movement ability. It is a denial ability, notably a knockback and stun ability with movement tied to it. And what that means is that all the upgrades of the ability and the functionality of the ability itself are focused on you using it as a denial tool, not you using it as a movement tool. Case in point, Wraith's teleport, one of the upgrades gives her double distance on the actual teleport, which is intentional. It's taking the movement ability and making it do more movement ability things. Meanwhile, with Gut Shot, there's none of that. None of his upgrades for Gut Shot give you more knockback to you or the target. No movement speed bonus after using it. Nothing of the sort. Then his third ability is a crowd control ability, which notably, if you do watch Fades or other people who try and play Venator at a higher level, it's not a very good ability. It's really, really not, because unlike most CC in the game, it's not either a skill shot or a point and click thing, much like 7-2, Warden Cage, stuff like that. It is a very, very small AoE trap. Which admittedly, immobilize is a pretty handy thing. You can lock someone down for 1, 2, maybe 3 seconds. But the trick is that you have to actually hit them with this, and you can't really do that, and because it's it's a very finicky ability. It doesn't react well to map geometry. It has an arming time, so you have to be close enough to hit the target, but also predict where they're going to be moving in over 0.5 seconds, and then hope that they walk into it. And even then, it's also destructible, which is not very good. Now, if we compare this to, as far as I know, the only other trap ability in the game, Great Talon Trap, um, Great Talon's Trap is a lot stronger. Namely, it curses the target, it slows the target, which is already a massive boost. It's about, I think it has like a radius of 10 meters. It's like 8 to 10 meters. And Venator's Trap is 2 meters. Um, Great Alan's trap isn't destructible. It does have a timer. Both of them have a timer, but his trap isn't destructible, and he can manually trigger his trap from a distance with his ability 1, which Venator can't do. So it's technically, yes, he can use it in 1v1s and combat and everything like that, but it's just a very, very unreliable ability. And the problem here is that what that means is that you basically have an entire ability that's an entire ability that's used for occasional crowd control. And that's a big problem because instead of this, you could give him, or he could have a passive ability or an imbued ability, much like all the other carries, which would give him more damage, more survivability, more mobility, or something. But he doesn't have that. He's stuck with a crowd control ability that he can't really use, and that doesn't really help him much in fights. Also, additional thing, The trap gets worse the later the game goes on because it only sticks to the ground, and the later people go, the more stamina they get from items, from level ups, and abilities, and stuff like that. So later on in the game, people are airborne more, which means the trap gets even worse. So yeah, it's not very good. And then his ultimate is it's three very high damage stakes. Yeah. Which I mean it's a great ability. It deals a ton of damage, but as you can see here, the biggest issue here is that he has no reliable movement. And importantly, he has no reliable movement to get in or out of fights. He can't close the distance to a target, which is not great considering he most of his like he has a medium range gun and not really a long range gun. Um, and he wants to be up close and personal for his shotgun. He wants to be up close and personal for his trap. He can use a little. He can stay at a bit of a distance with his grenade, but even then, it's harder. It's easier to land in close range. And then the crossbow. I mean, the crossbow's kind of like all ranges, but yeah, not having any movement in your kit is a really big problem, and especially in the current way that the deadlock meta is functioning, where crowd control effects, notably silences, or not silences, I suppose, but stuns, slows, and other things are very heavily stacked and everything like that. That means that he only really has occasionally gut shot to get out of jams, but usually he's using gut shot to either try and get melee damage or to keep people off of him, which means that the only reliable movement he has is stamina and items, I suppose, which is not really good. That means he's already just, in terms of base kit, he's already at a disadvantage compared to every single other carry in the game. So, yeah, not great. But what about his stats? I mean, his stats are kind of not very good. I mean, his bullet damage fine, his ammo's fine. Most his gun is pretty strong actually. It's a little inaccurate at range, but yeah, I mean it's a solid gun. He does have pretty good health, and it scales fairly well. He also has this nifty whatchamacallit thing where he gains bullet and spear resistance based off of how much spirit power he has, which is functionally useless. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, given this ratio, if he has 100 spirit power, which keep in mind, to get 100 spirit power is either like 1,500, 1,600 souls worth of items, or pretty much the entire spirit investment maxed out, he gets 10% resist in both categories. 10% resist. That's 10% more max health, more effective health against these for 100 spirit power. And notably, which I'm going to talk about later in the video, he can't benefit from spirit power at all. It is pretty much useless for him. So he has what is functionally, I mean, it's nice. It's like by the time he reaches, I'm pretty sure if my math is correct, when he reaches level 35 and he has all of his boons maxed out, he has a bonus 4% bullet and spear resistance, which is not very good. That's really, really, really awful. Um, I mean, it's nice to have, but it does not help him at all in any fight. 5% bonus effective health is not going to change anything, and problem is that this is the fact that this is present means that it's supposedly a balancing factor as part of his kit. It's part of like what makes him strong, air quotes, which means that that's why his his speed stats, which I'm going to get into later in the video, are pretty abysmal. And part of that is made up by, oh well, he has innate scaling based, like he has innate resist scaling based off of his spear power. Except he has unbuild spear power. He has no need to build spear power. So this statistic is pretty much useless. Um, and then it just means that what you call it, he's weaker pretty much everywhere else because of these two statistics. They're just basically they're clogging up power is what it is they're clogging up power in his kit that could be allocated somewhere else. So you might be saying to yourself, well, what about Warden? Warden is a lot more is a lot similar, or not a lot, but pretty similar to Venator in a lot of ways. They're both kind of like not zealots. They're both kind of they both want to kill the patrons. They're both kind of like tanky characters that like um have a couple of things to deny the enemies and damage them and everything like that. Well, Warden is just kind of better in every single way, which is really, really sad to say, but he is. So, first off, Alchemical Flask. Now, this ability is more or less a Venator ability one, but better in so many ways. Like, the only benefit that Venator ability one has is that it has a small burn tied to it. Um, and even then, the burn is minimal, and the pure damage the burn does is pretty much negligible, which I will talk about near the end. Um, this, however, Alchemical Flask, it starts off as one of the lowest cooldown abilities in the game, at 12 seconds. Now it doesn't get any shorter like from ability upgrades, but usually wardens will build what you call it some kind of cooldown reduction, or they'll get cooldown reduction from other items. So usually this is going to be down to 10, 8, maybe 6 seconds, depending on the build you're running. And if you want to know what this ability does, it is so this ability, it deals spirit damage, which is pretty useful. It deals spirit damage to the target. It reduces their outgoing weapon damage. It reduces their outgoing fire rate. I believe it also applies healing reduction, and it applies a movement slow on a 12-second cooldown. And those buffs aren't like 2 second; they're like 4 second buff or 4 second debuffs for all these effects. This is first ability, mind you. It's already like Venator ability one has healing reduction. It already has three more debuffs than Venator ability one. Now, admittedly, yes, it has a little bit less range, but like 20% less effective range is not enough of a balance. Um, is not enough to make up for the drastic amount of power that this singular ability has. Now, what about his second ability? Yeah, no, Venator just kind of loses here. His second ability is a shield and a movement speed buff that goes up to 35% bonus movement speed while it's active for, I believe, 5 seconds. Um, he gets a massive, I think it's about like 600 health shield when he uses this, like later on in the game, which is, mind you, that's about like 15% of his max health, which is a lot, and it's scaled with spirit, which is beneficial because most of the time Warden is going to build spirit items because it benefits pretty much his entire kit. And I believe he also gets debuff resistance when he uses it, which is yeah, yeah, it's quite literally just a get out of jail free card. It's not quite as get out of jail free as something like Wraith Teleport, but it really is just okay, I'm going to leave now and you can't kill me, or I'm going to walk at you and you can't kill me, kind of thing. And if Venator tries to do this with like Gut Shot, where he like aims behind him with Gut Shot and he spins back around and jumps at the enemy, yeah, no, it just does not end well for Venator. He's usually taking about 25% of his maximum health in terms of incoming damage by the time he just reaches the enemy. And once he reaches the enemy, his Gut Shot is on cooldown for about what 12 seconds, which means he can't reliably stun the enemy. Um, for just damage or a melee. Um, and yeah, he's basically just stuck with his gun and his trap, which is not great. Okay, so what about his third ability? It's also crowd control. Yes, and unfortunately, it is quite literally a better version of Venator ability 3. Um, namely, this one is a point and click ability, so all you need is line of sight of the enemy and to be in range of them. Um, this one forces the enemy to leave the designated area unless they it forces them to leave the designated area at risk of getting immobilized. Um, so the pressure is now on the enemy to do that, which conveniently enough that actually pairs really well with your ability one because you're slowing them, which means that it's harder for them to escape. When you do immobilize them, it's about 2 to 3 seconds immobilized, and the max rank on this ability causes him to silence targets when he applies it to them, which means that all they have once this ability is ticking down, is stamina to be able to escape the zone. And hex trap, and then the hex trap is a bear trap that sits on the ground. Yeah, I hope you kind of see the problem here, where even though they might be like thematically similar and functionally similar a little bit in terms of roles, Warden just does so much more, and his abilities are so much more beneficial and versatile that Venator just falls flat. And then his ultimate is quite literally, you're not going to kill me. He channels for a couple seconds with extremely high resistance and unstoppable at max rank. And then he deals damage to all enemies in an area, and he heals off of that damage, and he gained even more movement speed while this is running, I believe. And it is quite literally the one of the best stay in the fight abilities in the game, which is why it's an ultimate and everything like that. But the thing is that this is really good for him because it means that even if he burns through all of his other abilities and he's like, let's say, half health in a fight that's not really going his way, he can use his ultimate, um, and then he can just run down the enemies, and suddenly he either flips the fight back in his favor, or he can buy himself enough time for allies to appear, or buy himself enough time to get to escape, pretty much. So yeah, even though the two of them might be functionally similar, uh, Warden just Warden has all of the tools that a carry might need. And then he also has a lot of just inherent sustain, and I'm pretty sure he has better scaling for his health and other factors, which makes it so that he's he's a lot stronger and he's a lot more versatile than Venator can ever be. So the question is now becomes: does Venator have any power scaling? Because surely Venator is pretty good in like the later game and everything like that. And I regret to say it, but no, not really. He has no damage increases for his 1 or his 4 in the AP upgrades. Now, this is a little misleading, but basically what it means is that if you take something like Wraith card, when you use that ability and as you level it up and everything, you get better damage on the card, and you get increased spirit scaling on the card, which basically means that instead of being it goes from like 1.6 spirit scaling up to 2.2 spirit scaling, which is a pretty big jump. His one doesn't have any of this. Um, it has a 1 second duration increase, I believe, on the second ability power upgrade, which is not very useful. And and the base damage doesn't increase at all. Now, the important thing is that the base damage increasing is actually really, really important for abilities like this because um, the spirit power multiplier, it's a multiplier. It takes your spirit power and then it increases it by that. So let's say I had an ability, if my math is correct, I had an ability that does like 10 damage and I had 1.0 spirit scaling and I had 10 spirit power. Um, from what I know, that would basically mean that the ability would now deal 20 damage. Okay, that's pretty good. Um, Now, if I had an ability that dealt, if the ability now deals 50 damage, and I have um, 10 spirit power, and it does. Mm, yeah, I'm gonna have to scrap this. Okay, no. That's a bad example. Yeah. There's no inherent damage increases for his 1 or his 4, which means that uh, it doesn't really benefit as much from the weapon damage increases compared to other abilities. Now, the 4 technically does have a damage increase, but it's a damage increase to the bonus damage of the blessed stakes. And from what I can tell, the bonus damage doesn't really scale that well with just inherent weapon damage, which means that it's a lot weaker. So it either doesn't scale or it scales much worse than the just base damage of the 4. The second issue is that boons don't scale any of his damage whatsoever. Um, it doesn't scale the damage of his explosion. It does scale the burn, but not the explosion. It doesn't scale his 2, and it doesn't scale his 4. Um, and the other issue is that the burn on the 1 only scales with boons, which means that you have to be getting a lot of spirit for the burn to actually start dealing a noticeable amount of damage, which means that he's inherently locked to having lower DPS earlier in the game, and he has to level up and be getting a lot of farm and a lot of souls to benefit later on. And I'm pretty sure with this also means that I may be incorrect about this, notably, but if I understand this correctly, from what I could tell from the wiki, um, like unless you're building weapon damage, he the damage of his abilities does not increase at all from him leveling up. Normally, when you level up, a character gets a boost to their gun damage, and they get a boost to spirit power. And usually, with characters with spirit power, that's a small boost. So, if we go back to the example of Warden, for example, by level 35, he has like an extra like what 30, 50 spirit power and everything, and all of that spirit power just innately goes into making his flask stronger. So a level one warden and a level 35 warden. The level 35 warden is going to be dealing more damage than the level one warden because he has more spirit power that just goes into the flask damage. Um, and Venator is not like this, where level 1 Venator and level 35 Venator are going to deal the exact same amount of damage with Gutshot. This is accounting for the fact that if neither of them actually get upgrades, and even then the upgrades are minimally useful, which is pretty awful if I'm going to be honest. That means that Venator is pretty much wholly reliant on items to be getting any additional damage from his abilities, and leveling up is only beneficial for the burn on the grenade, and that's it. He gets no additional damage on his 2 or his 4, and the last one, that's a pretty big problem because you can only really get so much weapon damage in the game. Um, and because he doesn't get any bonus weapon damage for the crossbow as he levels up, that means that by the time you get to mid late game, the crossbow just can't keep up in terms of damage. It's dealing like 10, 15% of a target's health with the thing, which keep in mind it's like a 3-minute cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown to deal 15% of a target's health. With that, I don't know how much you guys know about Deadlock, but that is pretty awful statistics. Like it is. Wow. Now, if we were to compare someone else, like let's say Seven's ultimate deals a lot of damage, and yet again, he gains spirit power from boons as he levels up, and the damage on his ultimate scales with spirit power, which means that just by leveling up, he's automatically got a stronger ultimate. That's it. Literally, he just gets souls. He levels up. He doesn't even have to buy any upgrades, and his ultimate is already dealing more damage. It's yeah, it's not great. Now, the other problem here is that Vendor has to invest in spirit for duration or radius or cooldown upgrades to his abilities, except he gains pretty much no value from spirit investment, which I'm gonna. This yellow text is present on most of his abilities. It's present on his 1, 2, and 4, and it makes it so that all of his abilities scale off of weapon damage. They don't scale off of spirit power. Um, but the problem is most of the items that make your abilities more efficient, that gives them better duration, better radius, and better cooldown, are spirit items because most characters have spirit damage or abilities that function off of spirit power. So it would make sense that spirit power items in the purple category would be the ones that gave you spirit power and work towards spirit investment. So that means that he has to cross invest in a category that doesn't benefit him because keep in mind, as we mentioned before, with the bullet resist scaling and everything like this is pretty much negligible. He gets no bonus damage on his main abilities from buying spirit power. He gets it on his trap, but yet again, his trap is so unreliable to actually hit a target. And even then, you're not, it's like 300 damage on like a 15-second cooldown on the trap. It's very, very, very minimal. It's pretty much useless. So that basically means that any souls that he's putting into the spirit category, he's getting half benefit from them. Literally, he's getting half benefit from them because normally, if you're someone like Wraith, you go and you build purple items. You're getting not only the benefit of the item. So let's say I get like Refresher, cool. Refresher's great. I get to reuse all of my items if I want to and everything like that. And on buying Refresher, I then also, as Wraith, get bonus spear power. And bonus spear power means my cards deal more damage. I get a bigger shield on my 2. My 3 deals more damage, and my ult deals more damage. Um, so you're getting double benefit from that. And Venator doesn't get this. And that's just the abilities, though. He also has a problem with extremely slow movement speed and sprint speed, and it is tied to the lowest in the game. Now, he doesn't have the slowest walking speed, that would be Celeste at 6.2, but it's still really bad. It is 6.4. That is sluggish. That is like Abrams and Moen Krill level of slow. And then his sprint speed is like 1.6. It is minimal. It is almost nothing. And other important thing, yet again going back to the previous sections, he doesn't have any movement abilities, which is another big problem. If he's very slow innately and he doesn't have any movement abilities, he can't get in close to actually do anything to his targets. Yes, and then the other nasty thing, or I suppose the final nail in the coffin, is that he is stuck in the slowest category of dash speeds. So for those of you who don't know, the game basically handles dash speed as like a bucket system. So there are basically various buckets that a character can be slotted in. So bucket 1 would be the slow characters. So this would be Moen Krill, Abrams, Venator, for example. Bucket 2 would be like I don't know, like Lash, Mirage, stuff like that. Then you have bucket 3, which would be like Paradox, I think, and then bucket 4, which would be like Celeste. Those last couple ones are probably incorrect, but it's basically just basically the faster the character, the like more mobile the character, the faster their dash speed, and so that puts him in one of various buckets. And currently, Venator is in the slowest bucket. He's in the same bucket as Moen Krill, who is not a very fast ability, who is not a very fast character at all, except Moen Krill also has a movement ability, which Venator does not. So he has the slow movement speed and sprint speed and dash speed of someone like Moen Krill without the movement ability of Moen Krill. And notably, the movement ability of Moen Krill not only makes him faster, but it also makes the pair take less damage. So yeah, Venator does not scale very well, like at all. And his inherently bad base stats make it so that he's very, very, very easy to pick off in the late game. Like he has almost no tools to run away. He has no tools to engage, and if you manage to catch him out, he's pretty much just dead. And now we get to the fun extra part, which is you might be asking yourself, hey, can't you just buy items to make up for that, like Warp Stone to make up for his low mobility, or like Phantom Strike to let him get in close and stuff like that? And you can, but now we get to the fun part of the item restrictions, where this orange text right here of his abilities dealing weapon damage causes him so many problems. Um, so, as I mentioned before, let's say we have Wraith here. Wraith carry, realistically, she usually builds Spirit, and so she can build pretty much anything on this table. Now, there are some things she's not going to want to build. For example, she's probably not going to build Magic Carpet. She already has fairly good mobility, fairly good speed. It's not really in her interest. But she could. It gives some spirit power. If you're feeling mean, you might as well build it. Um, but there are a ton of really good items here. You have greater expansion for bigger cards. You have Surge of Power, which is like if you put that on like your 1, for example, that means that you can throw a card and then build up another card while moving at full speed. Um, you have something like Mystic Reverb, really great for dealing a ton of damage to a target. Focus Lens, if you really want to burst someone down. All of these. Rapid Recharge, top notch, all of these. You can build them with Wraith. You have pretty much access to the entire table, and your abilities work with pretty much the entire table. And then you have Venator. Now, you will notice a number of these abilities have this little like negated sign on them, and these are abilities that these are all of these items are ability or All these items are items that he can't really build. Now, theoretically, he can build them, but they are pretty much nigh useless for him. As in, like, he literally cannot trigger them aside from his trap. It's not worth it. So you have extra spirit, pretty much useless for him. Mystic reverb, he can't trigger it. Mystic regeneration, he can't trigger it. Arcane surge, bullet resist, shredder, improved spirit, mystic slow, mystic vulnerability, which would be really nice. Spirit sap, I mean, he can build it. He can build it, but it doesn't give him anything. He doesn't deal spirit damage, and none of his ability, and he doesn't deal spirit damage and he doesn't want spirit resist. Maybe, but it's not really worth it. He can't build suppressor, he can't build radiant regeneration, or spirit snatch, or surge of power, or tank buster, or torment pulse, or boundless spirit, or escalating exposure. Which, keep in mind, escalating is one of the single best items for characters that have damage over time abilities, because every time that ticks, it builds another stack of escalating exposure, which means that considering his abilities are, burns, it would be really great if he could, toss out a grenade and get a couple of escalating exposure stacks onto the target, and then he runs in at them and like hits them with a gut shot or um maybe like another grenade, and suddenly they're taking a ton more damage from that extra grenade. He can't build Merc Mag, he can't build Mystic Reverb, and he can't build Spirit Burn. That's a lot of items. And a lot of these are items that a carry really wants to build. Tank Buster, for example, excellent item, really good on like high damage skill shot abilities, because it deals a ton of damage to the target and it cuts through their maximum health. Um, but he can't build that because he doesn't deal any spirit damage on his abilities. This is why this orange text causes so many problems. Is that it's not that he doesn't want to or he doesn't benefit from building them. For example, Wraith, she has no reason to build Spirit Strike. It's if you're playing close enough to be using Spirit Strike, you're playing Wraith wrong because you're putting yourself in extreme amount of risk. Stuff like that. So Wraith can, but doesn't want to build Spirit Strike. Or, for example, Torment Pulse. She can build Spirit. She can build Torment Pulse, and she deals more damage with Torment Pulse because she's going to be building spirit items and thus have bonus spirit power, but she's not necessarily going to want it. It's more rather than do I need this. But Venator cannot build a number of these items. He literally cannot benefit from them on any of his main abilities. And like, yes, he can use them on his trap, but yet again, his trap is so inconsistent and it's a one-time thing that building escalating exposure for your once every 20 seconds trap is not worth it. But here's the fun part. It's not just spear items that he can't build. There are also a number of gun items that he also can't build. And annoyingly enough, a lot of these are actually pretty good items. He can't really build Mystic Shot because he has no spirit power and he doesn't build spirit power. He can't build Spirit Shredder bullets, which would be excellent for him because he deals no spirit damage. Um, and I mean he can build it, but he does no spirit damage to benefit from the lifesteal and reduce spirit resist. Um, if that he can technically build alchemical flask or it's alchemical fire, but it's going to deal very minimal damage because again he isn't building spirit power. He can't build spirit rend because no spirit power, and he can't build spiritual overflow because again he has no spirit power. And so as you can see here, even like compared to Wraith, who has the entire map, and it's more so of a question of pick and choose of what will I benefit from in this current moment. Venator is just locked out, and I quite literally mean locked out. He cannot build these items. They will do literally nothing for him. And so compared to every single other carry in the game, he has half of the options available to him. And notably, a lot of these options are options that specifically carries want to build. Escalating Exposure, Spirit Burn, Mystic Reaver, Mercurial Magnum. All of these are carry focused abilities that are meant for characters that deal a lot of damage and are constantly aggressing and fighting the enemy. And he literally can't benefit from them. And so what that means is that he has to default to other options that are usually a lot weaker. And even then, most of the time, a lot of these, like a lot of the weapon damage things, none of them really benefit the actual ability themselves because yet again most of the time almost all abilities in this game deal spirit damage and benefit from spirit power, so all of the ability focused items are over here in the purple category. Um, so and there's like almost nothing in the the orange category because all this is based around making your gun stronger, whereas purple items are usually about making your abilities stronger. And so that means that he has to look for really a couple of things here, like ballistic enchantment, for example, which I mean it's a good item, but it's really not that great. Like it's a fine item, but it's like one of a very few number of items in the orange category that make your ability stronger. Um, so it is just drastic, and it's part of why he can struggle so much later, like later in the game, where like he like there is like I suppose like what you call it? Oh, I just realized of all of the non-active tier 4 purple items, he can build two. He can build lightning scroll and he can build transcendent cooldown. He can build two of the six. Oh, that is. Yeah, you. Hopefully, at this point, you're starting to understand why he can struggle so much and why he's not in a very good state right now. And here's the other issue: where do we even get weapon damage from? Because reminder, all of his abilities scale off of weapon damage. They don't scale off of spirit power. Conveniently enough, there are very few sources of weapon damage in the game, and most of them are conditional. Um, and if the ones they aren't conditional, they usually come with a lot of debuffs tied to them. So the conditional ones would be something like Hollow Point, Battle Vest, Close Quarters, Long Range, Point Blank, and Sharpshooter. Um, and I mean, they can work fine, but usually they're very iffy. For example, like sharpshooter, it's 70% weapon damage. That's a lot of damage, but you have to be at over 15 meters away, which means that if he wants to get benefit from this, um, when using his grenade, for example, if my understanding of it is correct, he basically has to hit his grenade from over 15 meters away, which is kind of ridiculous. It would basically be if you would it's basically if you were playing Wraith and there was a purple item that said you gained plus 50% or like plus I don't know, plus 20 spirit power if you deal damage from over 25 meters away with an ability. It's kind of ridiculous. It's not very useful, and also it's very limiting. And the moment that an enemy is within that 15 meters of range, he loses a huge amount of damage. Same thing with Hollow Point. The moment that he's below the 65% health threshold, he no longer gets the weapon damage, and so that means his gun damage goes down and all of his ability damage goes down. Because yet again, all of his ability damage is based off of his weapon damage, which is usually tied to conditional items. Um, Now, you do have some constant sources of weapon damage that are greater than 20%. The reason I'm putting this is because there are a ton of items that give like a very small increment of stuff like extended magazine gives plus 8% weapon damage, but realistically, plus 8% weapon damage is not going to be enough to make your grenade like very viable against the target in the late game. These two items come with downsides tied to them. Weighted shots makes him slower, and it makes it so he has worse stamina regeneration. And if you remember the sections from before, he already has terrible movement speed and no movement abilities to offset this. So that means if you're buying this item, yeah, you're getting 40% weapon damage for your gun and your abilities at the cost of uh, being even more exposed than you already are. And then you have Glass Cannon, which is an 80% weapon damage boost. Okay, so that's a lot. That pretty much doubles the damage of your grenade, for example, or at least the impact damage of your grenade. Oh, or, okay, it's like an extra, it's more or less double damage for his crossbow, for example. Okay, that's pretty good. What's the downside? It's like minus 13% or minus 15% max health on a character with no movement abilities and no sustain abilities. He doesn't have Warden Last Stand, he doesn't have any lifesteal, he doesn't have any healing, he doesn't have a shield. So, yeah. Now, there are a couple of items here in the maybes category. This is stuff like Berserker, Intensifying Magazine, and Opening Rounds, which I don't personally know. Whoops, I don't personally know if these items enhance his abilities. Like if, for example, if you do opening rounds with the crossbow, like does a crossbow benefit from the bonus damage. Um, Someone else needs to check that, but even then, usually these are yet again all of these are conditional abilities. He needs to take over 1,000 damage to get the full 70% damage boost from Berserker. Um, and so that usually means that he's getting all of his weapon damage when he's already in the middle of a fight, or notably when he's in the middle of getting jumped and he's already used all of his abilities. Intensifying magazine requires you to be constantly firing, which iffy. And then opening rounds. I mean, opening rounds is actually a pretty great item because you usually do want to open like, haha, you want to open fights with your abilities. Um, but yeah, even then, these are still maybes. I'm not sure if they actually benefit him or not. And now we get to the last problem, which is kind of just the final kicker, which is the pure and blessed damage problem. So if you don't know how these work, he has access to two unique types of damage. He has pure damage and he has blessed damage in his kit. Pure damage is true damage if you've played other games. It bypasses all resists and just does damage directly to the health bar. And then blessed damage is damage that does pure damage, so it's true damage, and technically it has an 8% health execute on it. The reliability of this, I'm not sure. It seems to be fairly inconsistent. Um, I think it has to be that where the bolt itself leaves the target underneath 8% health to then execute them, it's pretty inconsistent. Now, the problem here comes from the fact that in the current state of deadlock and with the current changes in March to the health investment, the characters overall and everything, everybody got a lot more tanky, and most people or pretty much everybody is building max health in their builds. Now, the thing is that pure damage is really good if we're in a meta where, because keep in mind, the relevance of these abilities is based off of the current meta that his enemies are following, which is not good design. So, back to my point. What is it? If you're in a meta where a lot of enemies are building spirit or building resists, it's actually really good because that true damage bypasses their resists and deals damage directly to the health bar. And usually, when you're building resists, you're sacrificing additional max health for a reduction to incoming damage. And so, the burn and the damage from the stakes, for example, benefits from this because it's able to even though they don't necessarily deal a lot of damage, they deal enough damage to that lowered health bar that you're able to actually, like, let's say you're fighting like I don't know, like a warden or something who has like a kind of just like a passive like 50-60% bullet resist. Most characters would struggle with that. But if you manage to land a grenade on him, for example, you could probably deal like 15-20% of his max health with one grenade burn. And that's not counting like if you refresh it or if you land another one and you like shooting him, for example. So yeah, usually when enemies are building bullet resist, the grenade is really good because of how the pure damage work. It bypasses or resist. Except if the enemy builds max health, it does pretty much nothing. There's no max health damage on the pure damage. There's no based off current health or nothing like that. It quite literally, if the target isn't building any bullet resist, pure damage is functionally useless. It is quite literally the same as if it did weapon damage, aside from like a couple of niche interactions. But it is quite literally the same as if it did just flat weapon damage. And unfortunately, we are currently in a meta where pretty much all characters are building towards maximum health. And as hopefully you can see the problem here, where pretty much a lot of the grenade's power, which is tied to the burn dealing this pure damage, it's just wasted. It literally doesn't do anything because there's no bullet resist for it to bypass. There's just a lot of health for it to cut through. And since it doesn't deal any percentage based health damage, it's kind of just cosmetic. And realistically, if you watch Fades and you listen to his stuff, he will say routinely that the main benefit of the grenades is the healing reduction on them, not the burn, not the pure damage that bypasses resist. It is the healing reduction tied on them. And then the other issue, this is that this extends over to the bless damage, where Same thing here. The blessed damage does pure damage. If everybody's building max health, it loses a lot of value. And then it also has the problem of the 8% execute doesn't really matter if you can't actually deal enough damage to reach the threshold. And this is where this ability right here it becomes a lot weaker because as the game goes on, because keep in mind, um, this important thing. Boons don't scale the damage of the force. I mean, the four only gets bonus damage from items and the golden statue buffs. I think. And so what that means is that what you call it? By the end of the game, uh, the crossbow really doesn't hit that hard. You can deal like 20% of someone's maximum health with it if you're lucky. But that's the problem, is that you're dealing 20% of someone's maximum health with an ultimate ability, and let's say they're at full health, that means that after 3 shots, you've only gotten them down to like 40% maximum health. You are nowhere near that 8% execute range, which means that it's pretty much just cosmetic. It does nothing because you don't actually even deal enough damage to reach the threshold for it to kick in and then even work. And this is made even worse by the fact that everybody's building max health, and since the crossbow doesn't deal any health percentage health based damage, you can't actually get to the execute threshold, and the pure damage aspect of the ultimate bypassing bullet resist is completely negated. So yeah, overall, is Venator a bad character? No. Is he weak? No. But he does struggle a lot. Obviously, there are a couple of things. For example, there are a couple of issues with his kit. For example, he has no reliable movement, and he has really bad base stats, which means that he can't get in with he can't get into fights, he can't get out of fights, and he can't stay in fights. And that basically means that there's not really much he can do. He can use grenades, he can use his ultimate, but he's just kind of he can shoot the enemies, which is great, but that's pretty much it. Um, it basically means that he's most of his abilities end up feeling very cosmetic and very minimally functional, and it just feels like you could play any other character, get the same amount of damage and effectiveness from using their gun, and then still have an entire kit left to work with, such as someone like Wraith, where you can totally build gun with Wraith and do really well with gun Wraith. And then you still have a card that heals you or shreds the enemy, bullet resist, or slows them. You have a 40-meter teleport. You have an ability that gives you infinite ammo for a duration, and then you have a massive CC ability tied to it. And so it basically it ends up feeling like Venator doesn't really just do much. It feels like he's just so debuffed from the way that his kit works and the way that because he's tied to this weapon damage for his abilities thing, that he has to get all of his power from items, and he's just so item reliant that he constantly needs to be meticulously crafting his builds, and you're relying a lot on conditional items such as like hull point and battle vest and stuff like that to really be getting any effectiveness. And if he tries to build constant weapon damage to not have to rely on conditionals, he's debuffing himself. So how do we improve this state of general like isolation from the other mechanics of the game? First one, you convert 5% of his damage from his 1, his 2, and his 4 into spirit damage. 5%. It deals his crossbow, instead of dealing like 100 damage, 100 weapon damage, it deals 95 weapon damage and 5 spirit damage. Now, does this really change anything? No, it's about a 5% nerf across the board for his items. But importantly, what it does is that suddenly he no longer has all of these restrictions. He could, for example, very well build escalating exposure on his abilities. Would it benefit him personally? No, not really. Because yet again, he doesn't really have much spirit damage to benefit from the escalating exposure. But escalating, if you get this stacked on an enemy, or a couple of enemies, because the grenade is actually pretty good at hitting a number of enemies. Like if you throw it into a condensed area, like the pit area of mid boss, suddenly you have a constantly ticking, escalating exposure on 3 enemies in there. That's really good for your team. That's like you have like a pocket run in there. I think it's like a 50% weapon, or it's like a 50% spirit power damage boost. You get the point. Him being able to proc escalating exposure on the enemies would be really beneficial for him and his allies. If he could build Mercurial Magnum, that would be really good. It could mean that he could very much go for like a gun oriented build and very well. If he could build Surge of Power, that would be fantastic for him because he could, for example, use his grenade as a starter to a fight. Um, get a little bit of bonus damage on the grenade, and then he can use the bonus fire rate and full movement speed while walking, or full movement speed while. That's one of those things. Second one, I think, and realistically, the 5% damage nerf across the board, it's not even a nerf. It would just be slightly worse scaling overall. But giving him access to all these items would be so beneficial to him that it would be worth the small hit to his overall DPS. Second thing, give him better movement speed and give him better dash speed. Look, please, he's not meant to be a tank. He doesn't have any of the tools of a tank. He's supposed to be a carry like Seven and like Wraith. So the fact that he's so slow really just doesn't make much sense. His three needs to be a lot more reliable. I'll say it. FT Fades will say it. Most Venator players you know and run into will say it. The three just does not work. It needs to either be a much larger radius, so it's like 4 meters, maybe 5 meters. So it's pretty much just a slightly scaled down trap. Maybe it sticks to walls and then lunges out at people. Maybe you just get rid of the trap and give him an entirely new ability. I'm not going to talk about that because that's a different video. Um, but he just needs to be more reliable and needs to be more like an ability that you intentionally use and you can reliably hit on the target. And then the other thing, which is at least for me personally, pure damage and blessed damage need to interact in some way with the enemy's maximum health. Even if it's something like pure damage bypasses resist and deals 0.5% of their maximum health um, per tick, that would be fine. Or like pure damage deals like its damage plus like let's say like 0.10% of the overall damage as a percentage of the enemy's max health. So like if you deal like 1,000 damage with a crossbow bolt, that would be okay. It would actually have to be like 1%. Make it so that if it's 1% max health damage based off of the pure damage delta, it would make it so that if you had a 1,000 damage um, 1,000 damage crossbow bolt hits the target, pure damage bypasses all their resist, and then it deals about 10% of their maximum health as damage, plus all the damage that it's already being dealt. Now, obviously, this would need a little bit of refinement and tuning to how the balancing would work, which is something that the developers have to figure out. But it needs to interact in some way because currently literally his one part of his two, so notably the final upgrade of his two that gives him the blessed melee, and his four is literally his three most consistent, or his three like truly consistent abilities are completely dependent on the current meta and what his enemy builds to be effective, which is kind of ridiculous. I'm gonna be honest. Like having a character who where a lot of his gimmicks and functionality is completely dependent on the current like overall state of the game. I mean, okay, that's kind of how balancing works, but I suppose a good way to put it is that the fact that how effective his one, his two, and his four is dependent only on if his on what kind of survivability his enemy is building for, and not at all. And he has no say over it. It does not feel good to play with. It just does not feel good. Anyways, that's going to be today's presentation. If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this kind of presentation, please subscribe because I'll probably be making more of these. Thank you all, and I'll see you all later.